Which country do you think has the most sheep? From the 1960s to the 1980s, Australia had by far the largest national flock of any country on Earth. Over the last 35 years, however, the land down under has experienced the single largest decline, dropping by over 50% from 170 million in 1990 to just under 80 million in 2024, and there are multiple reasons for this. Historically, the wool industry in Australia played an important role in the country's economy. To help stabilise the wool market, the Reserve Price Scheme operated in Australia from 1970 to 1991, essentially guaranteeing Australian wool producers a minimum rate and reducing the impact of market fluctuation. Tragically, multiple factors led to the collapse of the scheme in 1991, including aggressive overproduction, shrinking global demand, mounting debt, and a recession. The price of wool crashed and ultimately led to a drastic reduction in production through the 1990s. The next decade was made even worse by the Millennium Drought, which ran from 2001 to 2009, and in addition to competition from a growing agriculture industry, Australia's national flock hit record lows by the 2010s. In the context of this video, Australia is not only an outlier for its reduction in flock size, but also for its low density of sheep. Australia sits in the bottom 50% of countries in terms of density, the lowest of any country featured in this video at 10.4 heads per square kilometre. This low density is driven primarily by a rather large desert in the middle of the country, which isn't great even for sheep, who are found in the temperate areas to the southwest and the southeast. That said, the sheer size of Australia makes up for this low density, and despite the decline in flock size, this sheep shearing powerhouse still ranks third with its 80 million sheep. Australia is not the only country to experience such a large reduction in flock size over the decades, and we need only travel a short distance to view our next example. New Zealand has experienced the second largest decrease in the last 40 years, dropping by 46 million from 1984 to the most recently published year, 2024. For over a century, from 1856 to 1987, the most important agricultural industry in New Zealand was sheep farming. Wool was New Zealand's single most valuable export for 89 of the 112 years between 1856 and 1967, and much of this trade was focused on one country, the United Kingdom. In terms of the size of its national flock, during the 1970s and 1980s, New Zealand sat in third place globally, peaking at over 70.3 million in 1982, which is around the same time the proverbial sheep poo hit the fan. 9 years earlier, in 1973, Britain joined Europe, and over the coming decades, those pesky British bought less and less sheep products from New Zealand. But this wasn't the only reason. Other factors included a sharp reduction in government subsidies and a pivot to the more profitable dairy and forestry markets. Today, New Zealand's national flock sits in 16th place at 23.5 million as of 2024. However, there is one metric where this small and beautiful nation still shines. With its endless rolling hills and temperate climate, New Zealand boasts the third highest density of sheep in the world, at just under 90 heads per square kilometre, edged out of the top spot by two countries. Believe it or not, Syria has the second highest density of sheep, with an average of 97.6 heads per square kilometre. Given the smaller size of the country, Syria ranks 24th globally, with a national flock of 18 million, and while its density is by far its most impressive metric, this number is eclipsed by just one country. Together, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, the four members of the United Kingdom, are home to a higher density of sheep than any other country on Earth, at 128 heads per kilometre squared. One of the reasons for this is land suitability. For example, in Wales, where the density of sheep is the most pronounced, 80% of farmland is designated as less favourable area, which costs more to farm and produces a lower agricultural yield, yet is perfect for sheep, who are quite happy grazing in less productive areas and at higher altitudes. As a Brit myself, sorry New Zealand, I can also attest to the depressingly high consistency of rainfall in my homeland, which produces grass pretty much year-round, although I did take this video last week among the incredible stretch of weather we're having at the moment in April. The United Kingdom also has the largest number of breeds attributed to it in terms of origin on Wikipedia, with 33 sheep breeds including the Swaledale, which is one of the most unique with its black and white facial markings, and the Border Leicester, which has very pointy ears. Despite its high density and long heritage in sheep farming, the United Kingdom sits outside the top 10, with its 31 million sheep ranking 12th in the world by size of national flock. Interestingly, the UK is the only country in Europe to be featured in this video, unless you count what is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful countries on the list. Turkey is another nation with an incredibly high density of sheep, especially when you compare this to another livestock species, cattle. In terms of the numbers, Turkey exhibits the 10th highest density of sheep, with 57 heads per square kilometre. Consider the fact that Turkey is the 36th largest country in the world and is home to some of the most infamous predators, including wolves, brown bears and the Anatolian leopard. Managing roaming flocks of sheep is not an easy feat. Hence, many centuries ago, the Kangal shepherd dog entered the chat. Also known as the Turkish Kangal and the Anatolian lion, this absolute unit of a dog is one of the most famous livestock guardian breeds, and for good reason. The Kangal can weigh more than Conor McGregor weighed at featherweight, and is often seen with gothic-looking accessories to help protect it from the aforementioned predators. These guardian dogs roam the Turkish countryside with their flock, which they loyally guard with their lives. As of 2024, Turkey is home to 44 million sheep, the 7th largest number of any country, and has experienced the 6th largest 20-year gain, amassing almost 19 million sheep between 2004 and 2024. Turkey is positioned at the intersection of Europe and Asia, a continent that holds the largest number of sheep, but makes for the perfect segue into Africa, and a journey that takes us to 5 of its most interesting countries, starting in the north. Algeria is not one of the countries I initially included in this video, placing outside of the top 10. However, after looking at the world map, it would be a shame to omit this high-density region in the far north of the African continent. The position of this region is somewhat surprising when you consider that Algeria is 80% desert. However, roughly 75% of the national flock are found to the north, in a large belt of semi-arid grassland known as the Algerian steppe. Algeria is also one of the countries with the largest increase in national flock over the last 60 years, growing from just 4 million in 1964 to over 32 million in 2024, the 5th largest increase of any country in the world. This is partially due to Algeria's human population growth, which quadrupled from 11 million to nearly 47 million over the same time period, and is almost entirely Muslim. This is important because the festival of sacrifice, Eid al-Adha, requires more than 4 million heads of sheep every year in Algeria alone, with some sources suggesting this festival accounts for half of all sheep slaughtered annually in this Saharan nation. Algeria is the first of 5 countries we'll explore in Africa, and is the only one that sits above the Sahara, so we must now move south to a belt of livestock-rich grassland that sits beneath the world's largest desert, and contains the 9th, 8th, 6th and 5th largest national flocks, all of which we'll traverse in order. Uniquely on this list, Sudan's growth over longer time periods is not possible to calculate fairly, due to the country being split in two in 2011, when South Sudan gained independence. Although most of the photos I was able to find of sheep in Sudan depict an arid landscape, as one might expect at the southeastern corner of the Sahara, parts of this country are surprisingly luscious. Most of the sheep in Sudan are found in roughly the same area as the cattle we explored in the last video, with some interesting exceptions. The banks of the Nile River are noticeably more dense in terms of sheep, in addition to the more arid areas to the north, which are more suitable for sheep than they are for cattle. As of 2024, Sudan is home to just over 40 million sheep, a flock that has stayed roughly the same size in the short time period the data covers, something that could not be said for our next African nation. Ethiopia has witnessed the fourth largest gain in its national flock over the last 20 years, more than doubling from 18 million in 2004 to 41 million in 2024. Like other countries we've discussed, Ethiopia's growing national flock coincides with a growing human population, which has exploded from 76 million to 132 million in the same 20-year time period, according to the World Bank. Ethiopia is another country that appeared in the last video, and like Ethiopia's cattle, the sheep in this country thrive on the highland plateau, but in contrast to cattle, sheep are more highly concentrated in the areas at the highest altitudes, in addition to the arid areas towards the east of the country, which are not suitable for cattle. Ethiopia is another country where religion plays a significant role in the demand for sheep. Here, both Christians and Muslims sacrifice sheep, in reference to when Abraham's faith in God was tested, when he very nearly sacrificed his own son, which was swapped out for a sheep at the last minute. As of 2024, Ethiopia's 41 million sheep ranks number 8 in the world, and with the previously covered Turkey sitting in 7th, we must now jump one spot to view our next Sahelian nation. Chad's sheep are featured in a tragically small number of photos and videos, so this section will be short but sweet. The national flock in Chad has quadrupled since 2004, rising from 11.4 million to over 45 million in 2024, the third largest increase in the last 20 years. Chad is also the last African nation we'll be exploring that also appeared in the top 10 for the largest amounts of cattle, with a similar distribution south of the Sahara. As of 2024, Chad's 45 million is enough to claim 6th place, and before heading to Asia, we must explore our final African country. Nigeria is home to both the largest number of sheep and the largest number of humans on the continent. Like Ethiopia, Nigeria sits below the Sahara, and although the areas exhibiting the highest densities are found to the north of the country, where the tsetse fly is least prevalent, the presence of sheep throughout the country leads to one of the world's highest densities, ranking 11th globally with just over 57 heads per square kilometre. Nigeria's national flock experienced the 5th largest 20-year increase, growing from 30.8 million in 2004 to over 52 million in 2024. Unsurprisingly, Nigeria's human population also boomed during this period, rising from 141 million to just under 233 million in 20 years. To continue our journey, we must now exit Africa to explore the final 4 countries in this video, starting with one of the most interesting. Iran experiences one of the greatest contrasts between its sheep and cattle populations, with its 5.6 million cattle ranking 48th worldwide, far outnumbered by its 53 million sheep, a difference of almost 10 times. There are several reasons for this, including land suitability. One study published in Scientific Reports states that 98% of Iran could be classified as hyper-arid, arid, or semi-arid, which as we know is a lot better suited to sheep than it is to cattle. This Persian nation also has one of the longest histories relating to the domestication of sheep, which is thought to have taken place approximately 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, which includes land stretching from modern-day Turkey through Iraq and into Iran, among other countries. It comes as no surprise then that sheep are a staple of Persian cuisine and an important symbol in their culture. At 53 million, Iran's national flock ranks 4th in the world in terms of size, and having already explored the 3rd largest national flock in Australia, we must now take a small detour down the rankings as we explore Iran's neighbour to the east. The national flock in Pakistan has grown by 21 million since 1964, representing the 8th largest 60-year increase worldwide. 65% of the country's territory is classified as rangeland, which one study suggests accounts for 90% of the total feed requirements for sheep and goats in this country. Pakistan also makes for a particularly interesting comparison between sheep and cattle. This Central Asian country has the 6th largest national cattle herd, found in the highest densities around the Indus River Valley to the east. In comparison, the highest densities of sheep are found towards the southwest, in the country's largest province. Balochistan is more drier and more mountainous than the Indus River Valley, and is less suitable for cattle, who thrive in flatter, more productive grassland, than it is for sheep and goats, who travel longer distances and, as we learned in the UK, graze at higher altitudes and handle less productive areas better than cattle and horses, which we'll explore in a future video. As of 2024, Pakistan is home to the 10th largest national flock at almost 33 million, a third the size of its neighbour to the east, as we continue our journey to explore our final 2 countries. India has witnessed a meteoric rise in its national flock over the last 20 years, overtaking Australia for the first time in the mid-2010s, after which its national flock exploded in size. This increase is most pronounced over the last 5 years, growing by over 40 million since 2009, more than double the growth of any other nation. A quick caveat, 2019 was the last official figure provided by the Indian government by way of their 20th livestock census. All other years since are estimated by the FAO. India is another country that makes for an interesting comparison between their sheep and cattle populations. Cattle are found almost ubiquitously across the country, whereas sheep are found in the highest densities towards the south. This region is known as the Deccan Plateau, a vast semi-arid area spanning over 500,000 square kilometres, which in similar fashion to many other areas we've explored, is better suited to sheep than it is to cattle. There is no slaughter prohibition on sheep, however, and one report suggests that mutton is India's fastest growing edible meat segment. Despite India's impressive rise up the rankings, there is one country with an even more impressive flock, found to the northeast, on the other side of the Himalayas. China overtook Australia for the first time in the 1990s, and despite a few fluctuations hasn't looked back since. As one might expect, it is the 60-year time period where China's dominance is most pronounced, growing by more than 110 million heads since 1964, consistently more than any other country. Although not as deeply rooted as the countries of the Fertile Crescent, China also has a long history of sheep domestication, with one 2014 study suggesting that sheep were first domesticated in China around 6,500 years ago. Interestingly, although sheep are found on the Tibetan Plateau, this high-altitude grassland is not where the highest densities of sheep in China are found. The steppe to the northeast hosts the majority of China's national flock, in addition to the arid area found to the northwest of the country. This high level of production is driven by high levels of consumption. China is now not only the highest producer of mutton and goat, but also the largest consumer by total consumption, not per capita, which, in case you're interested, is Mongolia. As of 2024, China's national flock is a touch under 183 million, far more than any other country on Earth, and roughly 13.5% of all domesticated sheep on the planet. At 1.36 billion, domestic sheep are the second most numerous large mammalian livestock species, being edged out by the 1.58 billion cattle, which you can learn about in this video, titled "Which country has the most cattle in the world?" Thank you so much for watching.